Well, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is due to appear in court in London on Monday. These are live pictures from Belmarsh Magistrates Court in West London. The judge is expected to decide if he should be extradited to Sweden. Well, Lawrence Lee is there for us too. Lawrence, let's talk about the defence's decision to publish their case. What's prompted that?
Well, I think it's very much in keeping with the sort of Julian Assange philosophy of openness. In an hour's time at 10 o'clock GMT, we're told they're going to publish their entire defence online for everybody to see. Obviously, it demonstrates a level of confidence in their case. I spoke to Mark Stevens, Julian Assange's lawyer, yesterday, Sunday, and they're still complaining very bitterly that they're not being given fair dealing by the Swedish prosecutors. They said they think the Swedish prosecutors are in fact going to change the terms of their argument against Assange, that the suspicion is that they think their case doesn't stand up. They've complained in the past that none of it was translated from Swedish into English, and so they have still got very many problems, not least with the allegations and the arguments being put against Assange, the terms of the European arrest warrant that he's being questioned under, and indeed the very idea that he hasn't even been charged with anything yet. And I think one of the things they're going to suggest this morning is that since he hasn't actually been charged with any offence, why can't the British police here question him rather than having to send him over to Sweden for questioning? So they're going to go pretty much full tilt at the Swedes, and I think try to suggest that the case doesn't stand up and that the whole thing should be thrown out.
Well, we've seen in the past, if we can call it, sort of technicalities get in the way of the Swedish prosecutor's case. Do they feel they've really got it together this time?
It's not very clear because we don't know what the terms of the prosecution are going to be. We're told there are going to be witnesses, though we're not clear who that is. At the moment, one of the problems, though, that the defence team say is that some of the things that he's been accused of by the Swedes wouldn't stand up as actual formal charges in other countries. That's one of their problems with the European arrest warrant. And as well as that, at least one of the two women who has made the allegations of sexual molestation and rape against him has obviously talked about it. It's all over the internet that allegedly he had consensual sex with one of the women at night and then allegedly had sex with her while she was half asleep in the middle of the night, which in Sweden could constitute rape, but in another country like Britain wouldn't constitute any sort of criminal offence at all. And so these are the sort of things that they say are very much problematic about the Swedish case. And so I think that's why I say they're going to try and get the whole thing thrown out, because if Julian Assange did these things in another country, then he wouldn't be charged with it. And so therefore, why would he actually know that in another country they were the sort of things that could be liable to be criminal offences?
All right, Lawrence Lee, outside the court there. Thanks so much for that. Back now to our top story. Let's speak to John Bradley, author of Inside Egypt, the Land of the Pharaohs, on the Brink of Revolution. Joins us now from London to talk more about the ongoing, well, what people call revolution in Egypt. Thanks so much for joining us. When your book came out, a lot of people in the West mocked you for predicting revolution in Egypt. Why do you think so many people misread the situation there?
Because they don't know what's going on the ground. These so-called Western experts and correspondents and so on, they live very privileged lives and they don't immerse themselves in the popular culture. For the past 10 years, I was speaking only Arabic. I was living among ordinary Egyptians in poor neighborhoods of Cairo, and I witnessed the slow disintegration of Egyptian society during that period. And it became very obvious to me toward the end, there was such a total sense of hopelessness and helplessness that there was going to be a revolution. And I was constantly hearing Egyptians saying to me, "Lazim yakun fi thawra," there has to be a revolution. And nobody else wanted to listen.
Well, let's get your thoughts on what will happen next then at this point too. Do you think Mubarak will be forced out before September?
It's looking increasingly unlikely, and this is very dangerous. Washington, by trying to keep him in power because it fears the Islamist takeover, is in fact setting everything up for its worst case scenario. We've got a reenactment here of the 1979 Iranian Revolution. The 1979 Iranian Revolution initially was not Islamist. It was a popular revolution just like the one in Egypt. What allowed the Islamists, who were the most disciplined and organized power, to take over was Washington's insistence on propping up the Shah to the last minute. And we're going to see this happen in Egypt. The fact that they're propping up Mubarak and the Mubarak regime is going to radicalize the people on the streets of Cairo and the other cities of Egypt. And the best organized and most disciplined force, even though they don't have a great deal of popularity in Egypt itself, are the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood will move to fill that vacuum.
Should that necessarily be something feared by the West? I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood movement has not been in power in Egypt. No one really knows what sort of policy they might take should they even come anywhere near power.
Well, they're quite consistent. They were founded in 1928, and their policy has always been to Islamicize Egyptian society from below. They've never really been interested in obtaining power for the sake of power. And because with power comes responsibility and accountability. And the problems in Egypt are so vast and so profound that whoever's in power in 5 years from now, for example, is going to be blamed for the mess that still exists. They're interested in
So do you think they're not really interested in running the
society.
country, single-handedly at least?
They're interested in the parliament, the talking shop, because Islamist groups in general thrive in opposition. They like to hold the powers that be to account, and they like to use the mess that they create to stir up Islamists further. But of course, ultimately, they would like to institutionalize their agenda. And when you look at what their agenda is, according to their 2007 policy document, for example, it's actually very clear. I don't see where the confusion is. They want an Islamist state. They want the government to be overseen by a group of Islamist clerics, and they want Sharia law. And unfortunately, they've been so successful in Islamicizing society over the past 20 years that they could actually get the people behind them, although Egypt historically is very pluralistic and very tolerant.
Is there something to be surprised at the level of political maturity of this protest movement? They've organized themselves, haven't they, when it comes to everything from food, security, even in the way that they've responded to the violence with limited acts of violence, I guess you could say.
It is surprising in a sense because the opposition movements, including the Brotherhood, have been decimated over the past 30 years. But Egyptians are extraordinarily resourceful. They've had to be. 60% or so live in poverty. They survive on a daily basis almost in these conditions in their houses. It's almost as though there's been a slow kind of revolution within Egyptian society over 30 years. And they've got used to pulling on every single resource they can and working together. And so that kind of community spirit doesn't really surprise me.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks so much for talking to us, John Bradley.
Thank you.
Well, dozens of homes have been burned down by bushfires in Western Australia. More houses are under threat as the blaze engulfs the outskirts of Perth. Well, firefighters say 1,600 hectares of land was destroyed over the weekend. Andrew Thomas reports now from Sydney.
After widespread floods and a tropical cyclone, the latest natural disaster to hit Australia, bushfires. Southeast of the West Australian capital Perth, a spark from industrial equipment lit bone-dry grass, a second fire developing to the north of the city.
And whilst Victoria battles floodwaters, over in the west, people are battling bushfires. And we've seen the loss of homes. People who have been through the devastation of knowing that all of their possessions are gone, many of them not able to take things with them that are precious to them and which are now lost.
Gusty winds fanned the flames, houses in their path destroyed, and residents urged to abandon property.
All of a sudden the police just came along and said, please move along now, like the fire has jumped with the wind and everyone had to leave.
During daylight, the fire is being fought from the air, as well as from land. But it's been overnight when helicopters can't fly that the flames have been at their most destructive.
It's horrendous conditions. We knew it was going to be difficult to control these sort of fires overnight. We don't have the aerial support, but the ground crews get in there and do their best to protect properties and hold it.
While winds remain strong, the flames have the upper hand, homeowners doing what they can to stop their progress. These fires come 2 years to the day after Black Saturday, the worst bushfires in Australian history that killed over 150 people. So far, property the main victim this time around. Andrew Thomas, Al Jazeera, Sydney.
Well, South Sudan is expected to become the world's newest country on Monday when the final result from the secession referendum is announced. The nation's global diaspora voted in the poll. Around 3,500 live in the U.S. county of San Diego in California, home to the country's third largest Sudanese community. Well, Rob Reynolds has been asking them about their hopes for the future.
When Matthew Riek walks the streets of San Diego, he sometimes thinks of the long journey he endured as one of South Sudan's lost boys, orphans wandering through a war